Raising teenagers is hard. Understatement of the century. This is Mentor Select. Mentor Select. Parenting teens to be successful adults. Mentor Select serves parents who are raising teens. Every week, Derek interviews leading experts that work with teens, educators, counselors, mentors, and authors to give you practical tips, strategies, and resources that you can incorporate immediately to better connect and understand your teen. All while parenting them to be successful adults, focusing on social and emotional development, something that's left out of the classroom, but not in ours. Be sure to subscribe, share, and rate. This is Mentor Select, and this is your host, Derek Phillips.
Welcome to episode 84 of the Mentor Select podcast. I am thrilled that you're joining us this week. Parents, today you are in for a real treat. I have the founder of Movement 21 Empowerme, Tuan Nguyen, with us today. How are you, Tuan?
Hey, what's going on, Derek, man? Glad to be on the call with you today. I'm excited. Yeah, I'm definitely fired up just to be in proximity of this and just with the audience that's tuning in right now. So, yeah, I'm good, bro.
Fantastic. Well, certainly happy we were able to connect. I know that you have a wealth of just experience and tips for the parents. So we're going to jump right into it. So, Tuan, how did you first get started working with teens?
Man, honestly, I had to go through being a teen in order to be able to work with teens. So let's just say that I went through a lot of pain points as a child growing up in our culture. I guess the best way I would describe it is, Derek, I grew up in this very high performance agent driven culture where our means of success was like you had to be like successful. You had to have an education. The doctor thing was really big in the Asian culture, right? You with me? You probably gonna have an Asian doctor yourself, right?
I've had some, definitely.
Right. And no, I'm not related to him either, by the way. So just to kind of
got the same last name. I got to be related.
Yeah, I get that all the time, bro. They're like, "Hey, are you related to such?" I mean, no, I'm not. Okay, just because he's a doctor, But I mean, that's how it started off. Growing up, I never really had, the way I saw things was, okay, education equals success, and then you make a lot of money, and that was pretty much it. And so I grew up in that culture where this is what I thought I was supposed to be. And not only that, some of the things I used to hear a lot was, Tuan, you have great potential.
Okay.
Great potential. Okay. And as a child growing up, that sounded great. So here, check this out. So on one end, my parents are driving me to become this so-called doctor,
right,
by getting this great education. And on the other end of it is, I hear you got great potential, and something else I hear is you can be whatever you want to be.
It's a conflict. It's the two opposite ends of the spectrum.
There's a big conflict going on here, and I don't know how to deal with this as a child, because I'm trying to meet my parents' expectations, but still, as I kind of just continued to grow, and just early in my middle school, I started just kind of failing at school. I started getting really influenced by my friends and really getting involved with trying to seek social status. So approval from my friends became more important than approval from my parents.
Okay.
And of course, I grew up with a family that was always at work. They came from Vietnam, so they tried to buy every single thing for me that they didn't have. What was missing was I had good parents. I suffered from not having good parenting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, certainly elaborate on that some more.
Because I had the greatest parents in the world, I was lacking the leadership development in that because they were never there.
Okay. So parenting, you can't outsource that. You can't put a price on that. You have to actually be there and lead, is what you're saying.
Right. And so I was missing that absence of what a role model leadership looked like. So I saw provision, but I didn't see how I could develop into becoming what they wanted me to become. So that's why leadership development is so important for me now, because of course, just through that struggle of growing up lacking the leadership development, I started seeking for leadership in all the wrong places. because I wanted a place of value. Okay.
Okay.
So once I got into middle school, I started finding more value in my friends and stuff like that. Of course, that led me down a path of joining gangs.
Okay.
Got involved with drugs.
So it became your secondary family, essentially, the gangs. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it gave me a sense of worth. I felt needed. I felt like I belonged. And from there, it went to gangs, drugs, selling drugs. That led me down a path of, eventually addiction to incarceration, addiction back to incarceration. I went to prison, not just once, twice, and even a third time.
Okay.
And that's really where, I think I spent about 10 years in and out of prison.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm sure you learned a lot of valuable lessons there. We're certainly going to dive deeper on that momentarily. But going back to what was your inspiration for founding Movement 21?
One of the questions that I love asking when it comes to prison reform, and this ties in with youth development too, is are we creating leaders or are we creating followers?
Okay.
And what I realized that through all these years of my incarceration, I've never been in any type of leadership development programs that are in prison. And I had to ask, why is this? Why was this? And just speaking about our culture today, I mean, it is prevalent today where everything has to be visible. Like, I mean, you want everybody to see what you're doing. So one thing I discovered on why I went back to prison so many times was I wanted to be discovered, but I wasn't willing to be developed.
Okay.
So that was a big part of my journey where I didn't have the development in order to lead myself, and not only as a youth, but even as an adult.
Okay.
Because I've never been exposed to personal growth. I've never been exposed to leadership development. I've never been exposed to what communication even looks like.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of just...
That definitely sets a person up to be a follower, missing a lot of key components.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, you just think about it. So education at an early young age came to a point where outside of pleasing my parents and getting straight A's and maybe getting a cool allowance, getting nice presents and stuff, it got to the point where it didn't really have any value for me because, number one, I realized I don't want to be a doctor. And then my pursuit of trying to meet these expectations were way too high. And then I failed miserably at math. And then here goes this thing where if you were to ask me what it was my dream back then, I wouldn't even be able to tell you. So the reason why I say that, Derek, is when I don't have a dream attached to my education as a youth, education becomes kind of redundant for me. And I don't see the value in it. I go through the repetitions of just being there, but I'm really not there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, certainly. Just kind of going through the motions.
That's it. And so how many teens actually go through that? Because my parents never once asked me, Tuan, what is your dream?
Wasn't about you. It was about their dream.
It was about living out their dreams instead of ever asking, like, what is your dream? What were you destined to be? Like, I never had anyone ask me these great questions as a child. And so I think that's where really my passion now in working with youth was, man, if only I had people in my life that were able to draw those things out of me. Because I spent 30 years of my life looking outward for answers and never looking inward for answers.
Yeah, I think many of us can relate to that. Especially probably anyone can relate to that at some point in their lives. Because, it seemed like it'd be obvious to look inside internally, but we're looking externally for that validation or answers. So when you're working with teens, I'm sure you encounter teens who were in a similar situation you were as a kid, where they feel like they're under so much pressure because their parents have just these high expectations for them that may not be aligned with their dreams. How do you guide them, coach them?
Man, honestly, that's been challenging for me because I know how I went through it. I want to share a story that I recently ran across. So I deal a lot with the Asian community too, and ran across this lady. So she's an emotional intelligence speaker and deals with a lot of families and stuff like that. Tells me about a story about a young man that just graduated medical school, got his degree and everything. once he completed, she tells me the story about how he gave his parents his degree after he completed it. That same night, he wrote a note, committed suicide, and on that note said, "This is what you wanted. This is what you got." Bam.
Oh, wow.
Just like that.
Wow.
And
That's a true story, huh?
It's a true story.
Wow, it's so sad.
And I got to say that that's not a big surprise in some of the cultures, because I run across youth that deal with this all the time. I run into with college students, I come with high schoolers. I mean, they tell me the same thing of how there's so much pressure on them to perform and meet these expectations in doing something that they don't love doing.
Yeah, it's miserable.
Yeah, man. It's
and I think what makes it even harder now is because now they're exposed to so much. They're exposed to kids who are YouTube stars. They're exposed to so many people their age who are doing what they want to do, versus previous generations. We didn't have as much exposure with the internet and all of that. So we kind of didn't know any better for the most part. We just thought, okay, that's the way it's supposed to be. Go to school, study hard, and get a good job, be successful. But kids now, they know that there's many other options.
Oh, yeah.
I think that really makes it even harder. I can imagine.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that, Derek, because so right now I'm currently working with 7 schools. Most of them are after school programs. One of the unique things that we started doing, that I started doing in the prisons, and we can kind of touch on that, is the power of a round table. Okay. So the power of the round table is contingent on placing them in a setting where leadership is modeled by asking great questions.
Right.
Okay. Because for most children or most youth, they've never been exposed to that type of leadership environment. And so one thing I saw that was happening in the prison system, as well as some of the youth that I'm working with, is the power of asking great questions. In 2018 was when I got out of prison on a 5-year sentence. I discovered that one of the missing elements in prison reform was leadership development. Discovered the John Maxwell Team during that time, which is one of the greatest leadership organizations in the world. If you guys don't know who John Maxwell is, check him out. He's like a leadership guru, written over 100 books, sold over 32 million copies.
Yeah, he's a man.
Yeah, he's a beast. But that's when I really discovered, like, this is what was missing in my life as a child, was number one, leadership development, personal growth. Like, what is that?
Right.
I mean, no one exposed me to these things as a child. So what I was lacking at that time, Derek, was a poor self-image. I mean, I wasn't lacking that. I had a poor self-image. And that was one of the biggest barriers I had in my growth, because my poor self-image wouldn't allow me to be amongst eagles.
Right.
Okay. And I started thinking about that, if I learned how to build on a healthy self-image at an early young age, where could I be? Where could I be? What are the possibilities if I really learned the importance of developing a healthy self-image as a child? You know?
So I'm sure parents listening right now, they're like, okay, I believe in that. I know how important it is, but how do I help my teens develop a healthy self-image?
That's a great question. So when I was in prison, I started really studying more about personality styles, and I started looking into DISC behaviors. This stuff was so foreign to me at this time, Derek. And I don't know, have you ever taken like a Myers-Briggs assessment or DISC?
Yes.
Okay. So when I discovered this in prison, I started teaching on leadership communication, but then I started adding the DISC model into it. And what I realized was a game changer. Let me tell you why. Because I was in a culture where 2 things that were lacking were vision and authenticity. You had a bunch of men that were locked up because they didn't have a vision for their life, because they were too busy trying to be someone they weren't.
Right.
And that's why I always love saying this, is I love pushing people out of their comfort zone, but never out of their strength zone. And when I realized it, because it's so easy for people to push you out of your comfort zone, but into an area of your weakness.
Yeah.
It's not that men and women lack ability. It's that men and women lack the ability to recognize another person's ability.
Okay.
And so you see how important this is in motivating your child to be what they were called to be. Is number one, if I could recognize my child's ability and their potential, then motivation comes in and becomes more beneficial. But most of us try to motivate our children into becoming something that we don't know that they're capable of becoming.
Right.
Does that make sense?
We're predetermining it before even knowing what their strengths are. It's like predestined.
Right.
Yeah.
I love you. So I use this example a lot at some of the schools that I work with. So I'll bring up like 4 kids, and I'll bring up 4 kids, and each kid identifies a certain animal type. Right. And so let's just say the first kid, I'll be like, here, Daniel here, he's going to be considered what we call the squirrel. And I'll ask the children, I'll be like, okay, so from a scale from 1 through 10, if Daniel is a squirrel, how much potential from a scale from 1 through 10 does he have in swimming? Guess what they tell me?
Pretty
None.
low.
0.
0, 1, 0. You're going to drown.
He's going to drown. But you see what I'm doing? I'm drawing something out of them. And what they're able to identify now through me asking questions is, what potential does Daniel have in doing what? And so here you'll hear answers of, oh man, he's meant to climb trees. Another one says he chases he chases after nuts, and then he goes on.
He's best at doing that.
Right.
Yeah, that's his strength zone.
That's his strength zone. And I'll ask him this. And as I just keep on asking them questions on what does a squirrel do best? And then how do I take a squirrel into an environment where he's forced to swim? What happens? The light bulb comes on now, because now they see that everybody was born with different gifts and talents.
Right.
If you can get them to see that, then you could really help them tap into what authenticity looks like, because we live in a world right now where everything is just based on visibility, comparison. I mean, authenticity is something that's really lacking in our world today.
Oh yeah, big time. Totally agree. I love that exercise. I like it a lot. I can see how it really resonates with the kids. Now, would you recommend for parents to say if they're having trouble identifying the strengths of their teenagers, would you recommend to have them take the DISC assessment or something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the John Maxwell team, we have our youth certification. So every year we come into the schools and we do a global youth initiative really geared towards self-image, character development, anti-bullying. We do all those things inside the public schools and even the private schools. One of the things that I'm currently doing right now with 2 of our middle schools is we have what we call the Student Success Report. And the report is geared towards 16 pages in depth. So the kid goes through this maybe 15 to 20 minute test. And then through those questions, he answers them. And then it generates an assessment that's geared towards how they communicate and how they're wired, their strengths and their challenges as a child. And let me tell you, like, I've done over 100 of these reports. And the power of, and I say this because I never want to just confine someone just to their identity being on an assessment. I don't want to just say, hey, Derek, this is who you are on this paper.
Right.
But that's a great way to start. And I'm going to say this, I'm going to share why.
Some solid science behind it, certainly.
It is. I mean, so of course, there's flexibility to step outside of that box, but it's a great way to start for parents and teachers to look at how they're communicating towards these children and how do I motivate them according to their style. And I lead not by assumption, but I lead now by asking questions now.
You keep coming back to that, the importance of asking questions. I was going to come back to that, but certainly, why is that so important?
The power of the round tables. And
yeah, I certainly want to hear more about that round table. That sounds so cool.
Let me just share a couple experiences I had with the roundtables with the youth, okay?
Definitely.
So we run an I Choose program, which is geared towards 16 valuable lessons from choices to character development to self-worth to, so many different avenues that children go through, right? And so as they go through these lessons, one of the greatest questions is the who are you question. And I'm telling you, like when this question is asked, you know how hard it is for you to answer this question on who are you?
Oh, wow.
Now, think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for us adults to answer this.
And when I say, well, I never was asked that as a teen or kid, so I can imagine how hard that would have been. I would have been stumped as well. It's sad though.
Right. So let me ask you this, Derek. Why do you think we were never asked that question growing up?
Speaking from my parents and who were raising me, they didn't care. Yeah, it wasn't that important to them.
Right.
They had already decided who I was. Concluded.
Yeah, that's one of the most powerful questions that everybody gets stumped on. And I want to share this story because I love painting this illustration right here. Have you seen the movie Alice in Wonderland?
I have, yeah. I remember it.
Yeah, and so it's a Disney classic, but there's a scene where Alice is walking down this deserted path, okay? And as she's walking on this path, she runs across this fork in the road. And the fork splits into two paths, and there she has this divine encounter with the Cheshire Cat. She asked the cat, hey, which road should I take? The cat looks at her and says, well, where are you going? She says, well, I really don't know. And I'll never forget what the cat said in his response. He said, well, I guess it really doesn't matter then. The reason why I love telling this story is because what I got from this was that Cheshire Cat was the worst life coach in history. And the reason why is in the midst of someone seeking to find their way, he gave up after asking one question. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
That? And how many times have us as parents, as teachers, given up on our youth after one question? And if I would have just focused on being more strategic and having patience in drawing that thing out of them, because the power of asking great questions is I don't need you to tell me what I need to know. I need to hear from my own mouth. I need to generate that answer through you asking me the questions, because the power of hearing myself say the right thing and taking ownership of it. Because it's one thing for us to tell you what I need you to be doing. It's another thing for me to verbalize it because I came up with the answer and now I've taken ownership for it myself.
Yeah, that principle is so important. And it brings up the question for me, just kind of know how important this topic is. You have a favorite book on this topic as far as asking good questions?
So as a matter of fact, John Maxwell has a book called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions.
I think I've heard of that one. I'm going to add that one to my list. So it's a classic.
It's a classic. And I love it because, I was able to draw some, of course, I'm a person of faith, but one of the things I was able to also draw from that was through the teaching of Jesus. And I loved it because as I started kind of evaluating how Jesus really taught in leadership, was he focused on asking great questions. So I'll share this part with you. In the New Testament, Jesus asked over 300 questions.
Okay.
He was asked of by the Pharisees and the religious leaders 183 questions. And out of all those questions that they asked of him, he only responded to 3.
Okay.
And what I got from that was, man, that was the perfect model there, because Jesus knew what was inside you. So it wasn't a matter of him telling you what you needed to. Sometimes he would respond with asking another great question. And I started realizing that as a coach, where a lot of times I was more directive, I was good at telling you what you need to be doing, or I was good at, hey, look, if you don't have a vision, come to Tuan. I'll give you a vision for your life.
But they're not owning that.
Like, you're not owning that. And it's so easy. If I don't have a plan for my life, I'm going to fall for the plans of anybody. I think that's something that really helps our youth now, is really, really helping them define and refine.
Yeah.
How can I help my children and the youth define who I am, where I'm going, and how am I going to get there? And what's the refining process look like? Because I think that's that's the steps now. If I look back in my life where, man, first of all, how do I define who I am? And then how will that determine what I do and where I go? And how am I going to get there?
Yeah, certainly. And what's so clear when hearing you speak, especially about with working with youth, just how like excited you are about that, just how passionate you are about it. What do you find most rewarding about working with youth?
Man, there's nothing greater than just having that moment where you see the light bulb come on in their lives.
Definitely.
I think that's just powerful because, man, I got to be honest with you, Derek. Like, man, I work with some troubled youth, and then I work with some youth that get it right away.
Yeah.
And I wish everybody could just get it right away, where it's like, da-da, ha, the angels are there and the hallelujah comes on. And but it's not always like that. Everybody is wired different. Everybody has a different communication style. And that's why, like, now, as a discertified trainer now, I'm really so focused on really understanding where everyone's at before I can give them direction.
Gotcha. Wow.
Because you got to meet them where they're at.
Right. Wow. It's very important. Before we start closing up this interview, I know another area that's near and dear to your heart is prison reform. How are you involved with prison reform?
So I work closely with an organization called Prison Fellowship, which is the world's biggest international prison ministry. They have roughly about 93 academies here in the States and global. Wow. So when I went through that academy, it was predominantly faith-based, but that's where I really grew into my leadership. I started really understanding that if I expect to be successful, I have to have a mindset that's geared towards personal growth, leadership, and communication. That's why I love saying that, I have 360 impact now, because I got transformed through my faith, but through my faith, my impact came through leadership and communication. And so I started seeing the value in investing in leadership, personal growth, and communication.
Right.
Now I started looking at, man, if I only had this mindset early on in life, where would I be?
Probably president by now.
Well, I mean, I might have been that doctor too.
Yeah, possibly.
That was possibly too. But I know you're heavily involved with personal growth and leadership and communication too, Derek. But that's why my passion now is just, how do we take our pain points from what we went through, and now it becomes a passport where we can enter into some of these broken borders with our youth. Okay.
Yeah. The need is there, certainly.
Yeah, it's definitely there, man.
Absolutely. Wow. I've given us a lot of great just insight and stories and guidance. We got a whole page of notes here. And the parents will say they'll get a lot of value from everything you shared. As we get ready to wrap up this interview, I always like to ask my guests, being that you're working on the front lines with teens, youth, what would you say that y'all haven't already covered that you see that is really working, that's really resonating with them, getting through to them? So
some of the people that I work with right now are actually Christian hip hop artists.
Okay.
So we have an organization called Hip Hop Hope, as well as Eyes on Me, which is really geared towards discipling the youth in the streets and stuff like that. So a lot of these school assemblies that we're a part of in this next season are geared towards not only going in and actually doing these big assemblies, but then they bring in the music dynamic into this.
Has a whole new dimension. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's just, I mean, it's something that's kind of trending right now. Of course, I'm not an artist myself.
You're not a rapper, man?
No, I'm not a rapper. I can get behind the mic and then do some things, but that doesn't stop me from collaborating with some of these hip hop artists.
Yeah.
And coming in and just the power of collaboration.
I certainly can see how your communication style can actually supplement or enhance, when you collaborate with the artists. Yeah, that's a great dynamic, great duo.
Yeah. I mean, so of course, I mean, one is too small of a number to achieve greatness. And so we talk about that all the time about how, teamwork makes the dream work. And I mean, just really, when you realize that your dream is way bigger than yourself, then you come to the point where you're like, okay, either one, I'm going to get to a point where I get so overwhelmed because I can't do this on my own and I'm going to quit, or two, I'm going to go get help.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of like too how you said that's trending as far as with the assemblies and combining the communication leadership with the music aspect and the Christian hip hop artists. I think that's a good message too for parents, where just really adapting a communication style for their teens. They can communicate to them in a way that's going to resonate with them, and a way that is something that's on their level in terms of what they want.
Yeah, I've seen it work. I mean, they get out there and they go into communities and we work with the youth and things like that. So I said, man, you know what? Hey, I might not be the best rapper, but that doesn't mean I can't partner up with a good rapper.
There you go. It's in teamwork, because now they're delivering that positive message, but with that familiar delivery style in terms of rap, something that we know resonates with youth. Right. I like that a lot. I'm look more into it. And then the last question I had for you in terms of, so say teenagers have gone down the wrong path, maybe you've gotten arrested. What's some advice you would give to those parents whose kids are either already in gangs or have been arrested, to kind of help their kids make that 360? I already know them applying a lot of stuff you already mentioned, but any other specific advice you would give to parents in that situation?
I gotta be honest with you on that one, Derek. That is a really tough question to really.
I can imagine. Yeah. I can imagine. Yes, and yeah, it's no easy answer. I know that, absolutely. But just from your perspective, in terms of, you kind of already covered like what helped you make that 360. But is there anything else that you didn't cover in terms of, you went from essentially life of crime to now you're serving youth and you're making such a huge impact, and that's just such a major transformation. That's inspiring.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I covered everything, because that's right. that's so important.
So something that does come to mind, because it's an ongoing journey for me too, as I try to find better methods and strategies on how can I help the youth.
Yeah.
This comes to mind is staying in your gift zone.
Okay.
So if I can help the youth identify what their gifting is, I have a great way to help them understand what makes them valuable.
Okay.
And if I can help them understand that their value is not based on the approval of men, and their value is not based on the money and all these other things, their value is placed on the potential that God has placed inside them. If I can help them get to that point on understanding that, it changes the ball game now. I love this because, I think it's Dr. Miles Monroe. He said this, and I'll probably just leave it with this. You can kind of wrap it up after that there. He said, the world's not looking for you. Okay. Let me repeat that again. He said, the world's not looking for you, but the world's looking for what you're carrying inside.
I like that. And I don't think I've heard that one before. I like it.
That message right there has changed my whole perspective. Because if I had someone early on in my life that could help me understand that my value was based on my potential that was inside me, where would I be? And not only that, if I could find out what my gift was used for early on, and then I had someone help me identify my ability in my potential, then motivate me after that, where would I be? Because then I would know that my gift was here to solve a problem, and my gift is what makes me valuable. Man, where would I be if I learned how to hone in on my gifting and not focused on everything else?
Yeah. But yeah, I guess, but the most important thing, you're using that gift now to help those coming behind you to discover their gift. And I think especially your story, like I said, just so inspirational. I look at things like a blessing in disguise. Like we go through things, and it's tough when we're going through it, those hardships. But that's what makes us who we are, and that's what gives us our story, and that's what enables us to serve other people better. So all your experiences are certainly, it's a lot of value there.
So somebody asked me one time, well, hey, would you go back and trade it? I was like, absolutely not, because failure is okay. Failure is not final. And I think that's another important message too. I know we're about to wrap it up, but if we could even stress the importance of our youth learning how to fail and fail forward, I think that also changes the game too.
I agree. Well, yeah, you definitely ended with some even more golden nuggets. Loving it. So Tuan, how can the listeners get in contact with you? So I'm on Facebook. I send my email address is tuan@m21empowerment.com. My website is m21empowerment.com. Okay.
So yeah, I'm on Facebook. If you want to join my Facebook group at M21 Empowerment Group, that's another group that I run, which is geared towards personal growth and development and leadership. So yeah, those are some avenues where you can find me.
Fantastic. I've seen several of your videos on Facebook. You're certainly offering a lot of value, and you're just so positive and upbeat. So definitely a breath of fresh air for social media. You're authentic. So that's what's up. Well, Tuan, I can't thank you enough for taking time out your busy day to share your wisdom with the Mentor Select listeners. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing all of the great things you're going to continue to do and the lives you'll continue to impact.
Hey, absolutely, man. Appreciate you for having me on, Derek.
You've been listening to Mentor Select. Mentor Select. Parenting teens to be successful adults. Hosted by Derek Phillips. Raising teenagers is hard. Understatement of the century. We get it. That's why Derek interviews leading experts that work with teens, educators, counselors, mentors, and authors to give you practical tips, strategies, and resources that you can incorporate immediately to better connect and understand your teen. That's why we do the show. Be sure to share Mentor Select with other parents of teens. Follow us on social media at Mentor Select to stay up to date on the latest tips, strategies, and resources for parenting teens. Send your questions and comments to derek@mentorselect.com. Tune in every Wednesday for new episodes. Till next time, this is Mentor Select.